Wanting to feel sexy does not equal wanting to have sex. This video is kind of personal for me because I feel like if my parents would have told me that during adolescence, I don't think I would have struggled so much. I remember wanting to have others see me as pretty and attractive, but also athletic and fit, and also kind and caring and intelligent and clever. And all of those things were the qualities I wanted people to see me as. But I remember specifically wanting no one to think of me as a slut. And the thing was, I wasn't even having sex, yet I was afraid of getting that label. Because for many of the girls at my school who had all of those qualities, yet they dressed in a sexy way, that slut term was just used so unbelievably often to describe them instead of pretty or athletic or kind or intelligent. I remember being around 12 years old and really wanting to hold hands with Justin. And I really wanted to have him walk with me to my next class and sit with me during lunch. I remember wanting Jason to find me pretty and wanting him to hang out with me. I had so many crushes on boys during my preteen years that remained just that, crushes. I wasn't even in high school yet, and I hadn't even kissed a boy. But I remember having that feeling of wanting to be wanted. I know I didn't want to have sex. I remember learning about what sex was, and I know I didn't want to do it. I wanted to hold hands and hug and kiss a little and cuddle and be around somebody who wanted to be around me. Someone who found me pretty and wanted to hang out with me. It really was just simple human behavior and a part of human sexuality, and I know this now, but nobody told me this back then. I did have sex education in middle school, which is ages 10, 11, and 12, and it was abstinence-only sex ed. I remember being taught the different types of sex and being told why it's better to wait to have sex. And this aligns with what we know now, that kids in middle school want to know what sex is and why adults have sex. But for the vast majority of middle schoolers, they are not interested in having sex at all. And right here is where I believe that sex education is missing the mark during the middle school years. There was nothing really in that sex ed class that was telling me about my sexuality or why I'm crushing on every single boy whose name begins with J, apparently. Because there are 5 circles of sexuality, and the act of sex falls into only this circle, the circle of sex and sexual health. And this is where sex ed tends to concentrate in. It's probably the sex ed that you and I received back then. But there's a reason why I push parents to explain what is sex during the intermediate age years. I go over all of this in my sex ed parenting course and program, where I handhold parents through this talk at this age. Because it's so much easier to explain sex during the intermediate age and just get it out of the way, so that you can then refocus and prepare to explain sexuality to your kid who's going through puberty and doesn't know why they're crushing on Justin and Jason, and who wants to feel wanted and wants to feel sexy, yet they have no desire to have sex. Think of this, like it's mind-boggling for a preteen to see in movies and shows their favorite characters finally get together. And the culmination of all that building of the relationship is having sex. Preteens want to experience all of that buildup. They want to feel the butterflies or the excitement of getting to sit next to your crush or hold their hand, or that feeling you get when your crush walks into class and you see them for the first time that day, right? They want to experience that, but they don't necessarily want to have sex. It puts the idea into the minds of preteens that if you want to be around somebody, or if you want somebody to want you, to find you pretty, that eventually you will have sex with them. But as adults, we know that that is just not true. So then how do you explain that wanting to feel sexy does not equal wanting to have sex to your preteen or teen? If you're finding this video to be helpful or useful, you can show me that by hitting that like button, but really only if you are truly finding this to be helpful. There's 3 steps to this talk. Now, the first step is explaining what is sex and why adults have sex for pleasure. If you have solely focused on explaining that vaginal sex is something adults do to make babies, now is the time to move beyond that. You can check out this video if you need guidance to help you get caught up with this talk. Or if you want to work with me in my sex ed parenting course and fast track your talks to get to this point immediately, then go on and fill out that form that is linked in the description in the comments. Step number 2, you need to brush up on the circles of sexuality. Now, mind you, I would spend almost half a semester explaining these circles to undergrads in Basic Human Sexuality 101. So this is going to be very brief. You've got 5 circles of sexuality: sensuality, intimacy, identity, sex and sexual health, and sexualization. Let's get 2 circles out of the way. First, the circle of sex and sexual health. Now, in this circle, it's the act of sex, so vaginal, anal, and oral, and reproduction, and includes the consequences of sex. So when we're explaining what sexy means, even though it has the word sex in it, the focus of this talk is not in this circle of sexuality, because remember, wanting to feel sexy does not equal wanting to have sex. And the other circle that we can quickly eliminate is sexualization. This circle is about control and power dynamics using sex. Sexualization occurs when an individual uses sex to manipulate another individual. This manipulation can be seen as harmless as flirting, like when flirting is used to get something from someone, or at the other end of the spectrum, it can be seen as sexual assault and rape. Now, let me clarify. If a person is thinking that someone is looking sexy, and because they are looking sexy, that is an open invitation to try and engage in sex with them, let me remind you that consent is never implied with clothes or the lack thereof. So now that leaves us with sensuality, intimacy, and identity. The bulk of sexiness falls into the circle of sensuality, but it also overlaps a bit with identity and intimacy. Now, if I had to oversimplify these circles for this talk, I would say that sensuality is about your body image, intimacy is about your vulnerability, and identity is about your orientation. 12-year-old me would have wanted to have been told that when I got dressed in the morning to go to school, that I was choosing clothes that made me feel attractive, and that's okay. I would have loved to have heard that I should feel confident and comfortable in the clothes that I choose to wear, and that it's okay to want to feel pretty, and to want others to find me pretty or even sexy, and that my body image is a part of my sexuality, and that me wanting to look attractive or to have Justin find me pretty in no way means that I want to have sex with him. My sensuality does not equal my readiness to have sex. 12-year-old me would have wanted to have been told that my crushes on Justin and Jason were a part of human intimacy. Wanting to connect with someone and feel emotional closeness to them is normal. That craving this emotional connection with them does not equate to wanting to physically connect with them, but it could. It could mean that 12-year-old me was craving physical connection in terms of like hand holding or cuddling or kissing a little, not necessarily wanting to have sex. 12-year-old me would have wanted to know that my sexual orientation is not something that I choose. My crushes were all boys, and this aligned with what I saw on TV and in my community. I didn't struggle at all with how I was feeling or who I was feeling it towards. But for many questioning 12-year-olds, they may want to hear this. Learning about all of this, as well as learning about sex and all of its consequences, would have really helped me to understand what I was feeling at a time when I was experiencing all these new feelings and emotions. Now, I hope I wasn't the only 12-year-old that was feeling this, and so I would love to know in the comments if any of this is resonating with you. And now here's the third step, and I call it the transition. As a parent, you've got a major parenting transition that's happening here. During puberty, your kid is for the first time really experiencing the core parts of human sexuality. Take a step back and ask yourself, how can I best support my child during this time? Constantly telling them that the clothes they're choosing to wear is just too sexy for their age? Is that the best approach? Does saying that help them to understand their desire to feel attractive and why they're choosing certain clothes over others? Would teaching your preteen about the circle of sensuality be helpful? Is teasing them about liking someone from their class appropriate? Does it help them to understand why they're having those feelings? Would talking about the circle of intimacy be a more fruitful conversation? Is assuming their sexual orientation beneficial to you or them? Does it help them to understand the different types of sexual orientations? Could explaining that and showing them that you love and support them no matter their sexual orientation possibly save their life? You've got an important transition to make here. And it's about teaching your kid that human sexuality is more than just having sex. This parenting transition coincides with a shift in the consent talks as well. Let me explain. It's around this time that it's recommended to talk about consent as it relates to sexual activity. This would include discussing the legal age of consent, as well as explaining why an older teen or adult would be interested in connecting with an adolescent and why they want to build what would feel like a relationship with an adolescent. This is venturing into a talk about the circle of sexualization and the role of power dynamics in relationships. And if you think that sounds like a lot, it is. And this is why I continuously try to remind anybody who will listen to me that explaining sex is relatively easy compared to the future sex talks that you're going to be having. So if you've got an intermediate age kid and you want to get a handle on these talks and start preparing for the sex, masturbation, and porn talk, then fill out that form that's linked in the description and comments.